video, we are going to discuss the questions that were asked from the topic Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs for NTA UGC NET December 2020 and June 2021 March cycles. So if you consider the module People, Development and Environment, you might already know this particular topic is a very important topic from NET point of view. So if you consider the previous exams, you can say that they have explored this area so much so that we can find a lot of questions that were asked from this particular topic, that is SDGs. So what we are going to do in this particular session is that we'll be first looking at this Sustainable Development Goals. We'll get into know the general information or general ideas that you need to know when it comes to SDGs, and also after that we'll be focusing on some of the sample questions that were asked from this particular topic in our very recent exam, that is NTA UGC NET December 2020 and June 2021 March cycle. So through these questions we are trying to figure out the type of questions that you can expect from this particular area, and also this will give you an idea about how to learn about the various ideas or the various concepts that you need to understand or study when it comes to sustainable development goals. So basically, if you find or if you go to know about this particular topic, that is sustainable development goals, we can say that this particular goals were first adopted in 2015 as a part of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So if you consider this 2030 agenda for sustainable development, which was adopted by the UN member states in 2015, it actually gave a shared blueprint for a sustainable society or a sustainable development. It basically gives a blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. So if you consider sustainable development goals, it consists of a collection of 17 interlinked global goals. So basically SDGs or sustainable development goals is also known as global goals, and it consists of 17 interlinked or interconnected goals, and they are having 169 targets as well. So if you consider each of these goals, if you consider these 17 goals, each of these goals are having its own targets to fulfill. In a total, we can say that we have 17 interlinked global goals and a total of 169 targets that are associated with these 17 main goals. So this is a general idea that we need when we try to understand the sustainable development goals. Now we are moving to the questions, the sample questions that were asked from this particular area in the NTA UGC NET December 2020 and June 2021 March cycles. And through these questions, we will be trying to know more about these SDGs. What are these 17 global goals and how they are connected to each other, and also we are trying to figure out the types of questions that you can expect from this particular area and the perspective in which you need to study SDGs in general as well. So here you have the first question. So this is an assertion reason question. So given below are two statements. One is labeled as assertion A and the other is labeled as reason R. So the assertion says there has to be an integrated approach to achieve the targets of sustainable development goals or SDGs, and reason says many of the SDGs are interconnected. So it says that the 17 goals that we have in SDGs are interconnected. So as it is a reason, we can say that there should be an integrated approach in order to achieve the targets of sustainable development goals. That is what these statements together means, right? So if you consider or if you remember what we have learned or what we have said as an introduction to SDGs, we have mentioned this particular point there itself. So SDGs are basically 17 interlinked or interconnected global goals. So in that sense, we can say that as these SDGs are interconnected or interlinked, there is always a scope or there is always an approach, or we have to make an integrated approach in order to achieve these sustainable development goals. If that's the case, these different statements make sense for us. And also we can say that these statements are connected in such a way that the assertion is actually a proper or it is connected to the reason that is given below. So there has to be an integrated approaches to achieve the targets of sustainable development goals, SDGs. And why is it so? Because you have the reason there, right? Many of the SDGs are interconnected. In other words, we can say that as the 17 global goals or sustainable development goals are interconnected or they are related to each other, we should have to develop an integrated approach in order to achieve these different sustainable development goals. So both the statements are right, and also these two statements are connected to each other, so that we can say that both A and R are correct and R is a correct explanation of A. In that sense, we can consider option A as a right answer for this question. So that was a very gentle, very easy, very gentle question from this area. Moving to the next question. Which one of the following sustainable development goals or SDGs is related to sustainable consumption and production patterns? So if you consider SDGs, as I have already mentioned, it has 17 goals, or these 17 goals together forms the sustainable development goals or the SDGs, and it was adopted in 2015 and it came into force in 2016, and the target year for achieving these SDGs are 2030. So basically it was associated with the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, right? So in that case, we can say that it came, or it was adapted in 2015 and it came into force in 2016, and it has a target year that is 2030. So if you consider this question, it actually asks us to find out the goal or the SDG, or which SDG is actually talking about the sustainable consumption and production patterns. So that is the question. So in order to answer this question, what we need is a proper idea about the various sustainable development goals. So as we have already mentioned several times in this session itself, there are 17 global goals. You need to know what are these 17 sustainable development goals. That is very important, and also you need to know it in the right order. So you have to know which is the first goal, which is the second goal. That kind of an idea is also very important, because this question was particularly asked in that sense, right? You have given a particular point there, and they are asking us to find out this to which SDG this particular concept is associated with. So that is the question. So if you consider the various goals, we have various goals here. Goal 1 is no poverty. Goal 2, zero hunger. Goal 3, good health and well-being. Goal 4, quality education. Goal 5, gender equality. 6, clean water and sanitation. 7, affordable and clean energy. 8, decent work and economic growth. 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure. Reduced inequality, sustainable cities and communities. 12th one is responsible consumption and production. 13, climate action. 14, life below water. 15, life on land. 16 is peace and justice, strong institutions. And 17 is partnerships to achieve the goal. So this kind of an idea is very, very important when you're preparing for NTA UGC NET Paper 1 and when you're considering this SDGs as such. So you need to know which goal is coming first, or which is the second goal, which is the 13th goal. That kind of an idea is very important. So in this question, they have asked us to find out the sustainable development goal, which is related to sustainable consumption and production pattern. So that's why we have marked it here. So that is SDG 12. So goal 12 says about the responsible consumption and production. In that sense, we can say that the right answer for this question is option D, that is SDG 12. That is what we have mentioned here as well. So the right answer is option D. So this kind of questions can be also expected from this area. So you can expect general kind of questions which actually focuses on the nature of these different goals or years that are associated with it. Those kind of questions can be expected, and also you should have a very thorough idea about the 17 goals. That is again important, and also you should know it in the correct sequence. That is again important. So that is what we can understand from this particular question. So again, we'll be going to look at another question that is again asked from the same perspective, but the approach is a bit different. So if you consider this question, which among the following goals adopted by the UN member states in 2015 is related to SDG 4? So in the previous question, they have given us a particular concept or a particular idea in the question, and they asked us to find out to which SDG this particular thing is related to. So that kind of a question we have already discussed. Coming back or coming to this particular question that we are going to discuss here, the approach is different but the perspective is the same. So they have asked us to find out the fourth goal that is associated with sustainable development goals, and they have given us various options as well. So if you know which is goal 4 in SDGs, you can easily answer this question. So goal 4 in Sustainable Development Goals is quality education. So if you know the proper pattern or the proper sequence of the various goals that comes under the SDGs, this is a very easy question. But if you don't know the correct order or the correct sequence, then it is really difficult to answer these kinds of questions. So anyway, coming back to the question, they are asking us to find out the fourth goal that is associated with Sustainable Development Goals. So we have already considered the goal 4 of Sustainable Development Goals, and that is quality education. In that sense, we can say that the right answer for this question is obviously option B. Moving to the next question, under Sustainable Development Goal 12, Sustainable Consumption and Production, one of the targets is to reduce per capita food waste at the retail and consumer levels by. So basically, if you consider this question, as I have already mentioned, we have 17 different goals that are associated with Sustainable Development Goals, and also we have different targets that are associated with each of these goals as well. So if you consider this Goal 12, that is Sustainable Consumption and Production, there are 11 targets that are associated with this single goal, that is the Goal 12 of SDGs, that is Sustainable Consumption and Production. So this is actually a high level question, a more in-depth question. So this kind of questions can be also expected. So if you just know the different goals that are associated with SDGs, you cannot answer this question. This requires a much more deeper idea about each of these goals. So basically, if you consider each of the goal, there are 17 goals in general, and associated with these 17 goals, we have different targets as well. So under each of the goal, we have different targets to achieve, and also we have certain indicators that also helps us to understand whether we have achieved these targets as such. So if you consider this particular, as I have already mentioned, the single goal, that is Goal 12, Sustainable Consumption and Production, we have 11 targets that are associated with it, and one of those targets is the reduction of per capita food waste at the retail and consumer levels. So as we came across this question, we are first going to look at the 11 targets that are associated with Goal 12 of Sustainable Development Goals, and then we will be coming back to this question. So here we have the various targets that are associated with this. The first one is implement the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production framework. So that is the first target. Then we have by 2030, achieve the sustainable management and efficient use of natural resources. And the next target is by 2030, half per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest losses. So basically the question is asked from this particular target here. So by 2030, the goal is to half, that is 1 by 2, half, right? So half per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest losses. So we are going to look at all the 11 targets and then we'll be coming back to the question that we are discussing. So the next target is by 2020, achieve the environmentally sound management of chemicals and waste. Then we have by 2030, substantially reduce waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling and reuse. So these are the various stages that are associated with waste management. So by 2030, substantially reduce waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling and reuse. Then we have encourage companies to adopt sustainable practices and to integrate sustainability information into their reporting cycle. So basically it focuses on encouraging companies in order to adopt sustainable practices, and also it should be reflected in their reporting cycles as well. Then we have the next one, that is promote public procurement practices that are sustainable in accordance with national policies and priorities. Then we have by 2030, ensure that people everywhere have the relevant information and awareness for sustainable development and lifestyles in harmony with nature. So basically giving awareness to everyone about the importance of following a lifestyle that actually promotes sustainable development. And then we have support developing countries to strengthen their scientific and technological capacity to move towards more sustainable patterns of consumption and production. Then we have develop and implement tools to monitor sustainable development impacts for sustainable tourism that creates jobs and promotes local culture and products. So basically this is focusing on every areas which includes tourism and the lifestyle of people. Everything is focused, and in every field there should be an awareness about sustainability and sustainable development. So that is what it is focusing on. And the final one is remove market distortions that encourage wasteful consumption. So basically these are the 11 targets that are associated with goal 12 or sustainable development goals, that is this sustainable consumption and production. So the question here is, under sustainable development goal 12, sustainable consumption and production, one of the targets is to reduce per capita food waste at the retail and consumer levels by it. We have already discussed about it. So reduce half per capita, that's what we have discussed there. So 1 by 2, half is 1 by 2. In that sense 1 by 2 is option B. So the right answer is option B itself. Moving to the next question. As per Sustainable Development Goal 3, one of the targets is to reduce under 5 mortality per 1,000 live births to at least as low as, and we have the options 50, 40, 25 and 15. So again this is a question that is a bit more in-depth question. We can see that because you need to know which one is goal 3 or what is goal 3 in Sustainable Development Goals. And also you need to know the targets that are associated with the goal 3, the SDG 3 as well. So that kind of an understanding is what you needed in order to answer this question. So this is not a very easy question in that sense. So if you have a very proper idea about the correct sequence or the correct order of SDGs, you can find out which one is goal 3, and again you need to know the targets that are associated with it as well. So if you consider the goal 3 of Sustainable Development Goals, that is good health and well-being. So that is goal 3. And if you consider here, it is actually focusing on one of the targets that are associated with goal 3. So basically there are 13 targets as well as 28 indicators that are associated with this particular goal, that is good health and well-being. So we are going to look at the various targets that are associated with this particular goal, that is good health and well-being, and then we'll be coming back to the question that we are discussing now. So the first target is by 2030, reduce the global maternal mortality ratio to less than 40 per 1 lakh live births. Alright, second one is by 2030, end preventable deaths of newborns and children under 5 years of age with all countries aiming to reduce neonatal mortality to at least as low as 12 per 1,000 live births and under 5 mortality to at least as low as 25 per 1,000 live births. So it actually includes the newborn and children death rates. That is what it is mentioned here in this target. So if you consider here, there are two different aspects that are considered here. So with all countries aiming to reduce neonatal mortality to at least as low as 12 per 1,000 live births and under 5 mortality. That is what that is what the question focuses on. So under 5 mortality to at least as low as 25 per 1,000 live births. So please note this particular number, that is 25, that is what you need in your question. So we will be just going to look at the other targets as well, and then we will be coming back to the question. The next one is by 2030 end the epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria and neglected tropical diseases and combat hepatitis, waterborne diseases and other communicable diseases. So it focuses on the various epidemics as well as various kinds of diseases. In these kinds of diseases, that is again a focus of goal 3, that is good health and well-being. Then we have the next target, that is by 2030 reduce by one third premature mortality from non-communicable diseases through prevention and treatment and promote mental health and well-being. Then we have strengthened the prevention and treatment of substance abuse, including narcotic drug abuse and harmful use of alcohol. Then we have by 2020 half the number of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents. This is again important. A question was asked from this particular point also. So you need to give a particular emphasis to this point. So by 2020 they have made a target to half the number of global deaths and injuries that happened due to various kinds of accidents and road injuries. Okay, so that kind of thing was also mentioned under this particular goal. Then we have by 2030 ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health care services, including for family planning, information and education, and the integration of reproductive health into national strategies and programs. So it has focused on, or it has targeted in order to give a universal access to sexual and reproductive health care services, and it includes family planning, information and education. All these things comes under this particular goal or this particular focus. And then we have achieve universal health coverage, including financial risk protection, access to quality essential healthcare services, and access to safe, effective, quality and affordable essential medicines and vaccines for all. So basically providing these kinds of affordable essential medicines and vaccines to everyone. So equally providing these kinds of assistance to people. That is again a very important thing that comes under this particular goal. Then we have by 2030 substantially reduce the number of deaths and illnesses from hazardous chemicals in air, water and soil pollution and contamination. So these kinds of diseases and the deaths that are caused due to these kinds of hazardous chemicals and air, water, those kinds of pollutions are also mentioned here. Then we have strengthened the implementation of the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control in all countries as appropriate. Then we have support research, development and universal access to affordable vaccines and medicines. Then we have substantially increased health financing and the recruitment, development, training and retention of the health workforce in developing countries, especially in least developed countries and small island developing states. And the final one is strengthen the capacity of all countries, in particular developing countries, for early warning, risk reduction and management of national and global health risks. So these are the various targets that are associated with goal 3 of sustainable development goals. These are things, these are not concepts. You can just go through the points and you can learn what are the important informations that are associated with each of these goals. That is what we can do here. So if you need, you can just pause the video and you can just write down the points that are associated with each of the goals. We have already discussed about the various targets that are associated with goal 12 in our previous question, and associated to this question that is in discussion, we have discussed about the various targets that are associated with the goal 3 of sustainable development goals. So basically what I need here is if you consider the questions that were asked in this particular exam that we are discussing, they have moved further more into the depths of this particular topic. So if you consider the previous year's exams or previous year's questions, you can say that if you have a proper idea about sustainable development goals, and if you have a proper idea about the various goals, that was well enough for you to score marks for this particular area. But this time, if you consider the question, they have added questions in every level. We have very easy level questions, very general questions are there, and also they have asked us to figure out the various goals. Particularly, if you know the goals in their exact order, that would be really helpful. If you know it, that will really help you in scoring marks for these particular questions. The questions that were asked, or the questions that we have discussed earlier in this session, we have said that we have looked into questions where they have given us certain goals and they have asked us to find out to which sustainable development goal this particular thing is associated with or related to. So that kind of questions can be expected, and furthermore, they have asked us to find out the various targets that are associated with different goals that are associated to the sustainable development goals. So basically that requires a furthermore reading, or it requires a very in-depth idea or understanding about the various goals as such. So these kinds of questions can be also expected in your next exam, or in your next NET exam that you're going to apply. So what you need to do here is you need a very proper understanding about the various sustainable development goals in their proper order, in their proper pattern, and also if you can learn the various targets that are associated with it, that is again good, because that kind of question can be also expected. So coming back to the question, here we have the question which asks us to find out, as per Sustainable Development Goals 3, one of the targets is to reduce under 5 mortality per 1000 live births to at least as low as. We have already discussed this particular thing in our discussion on the various targets that are associated with goal 3 of sustainable development goals. At that time, I have already said you to remember this particular number, that is 25, right? So as per sustainable development goal 3, one of the target is to reduce under 5 mortality per 1000 live births to at least as low as 25. In that sense, we can say that the right answer for this question is option C, that is 25. So in this video, we have discussed about the various questions or some of the sample questions that were asked from sustainable development goals in the previous exam, NTA UGC NET December 2020 and June 2021 merge cycles. So we have included various types of questions. Very easy kind of questions can be expected, and also medium level questions can be expected, and also there are possibilities of them adding difficult level questions also from this area, especially if they're asking us to find out the various targets or questions where if they are asking questions from a perspective in which we need to know the various targets and indicators that are associated with each of the goals. It's not an easy task at all. So basically we have 17 goals that we can learn, but considering the targets, it's a huge number, right? We have already said that. In that sense, going and studying or going and remembering all these targets is not an easy task, but if you can just go through the various targets and if you can just read through it, in a sense that will also help you. If you can just read the various targets that are associated with all these goals that comes under sustainable development goals, that is again a very helpful way in which you can score marks for this area. So I have included different types of questions or different types of questions that can be expected from this particular area, that is sustainable development goals, and I hope now you got an idea about how to go about this particular topic, or what are the perspectives that you have to consider when you are preparing for this particular topic, that is sustainable development goals. So thanks for watching and happy learning.